Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Filipino American Leslie Keeler Saglio, a TEDx speaker and master coach based in Barcelona, Spain. Hi, Leslie, and welcome to Curito Connects.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm super excited too, and I apologize for our listeners because I'm a little bit under the weather, so I sound a little bit nasally today. So Leslie and I met last year in Portugal at Jessica Weaver's Wild Women Awakening Retreat, where I believe we were the only Asians in our group, but didn't really connect until towards the end of the retreat, where we shared a taxi ride to the airport. So I'm excited to open up a conversation with Leslie today on two impactful moments that really shaped her. One was in 2012 when her childhood best friend passed, and most recently in 2021 when she had a near-death experience. So I'll stop here first and let Leslie introduce herself to our listeners, to those who are unfamiliar with Leslie and her work, and then we'll dive deeper into the conversation. Lots to
Yeah,
cover today.
lots to cover. And yes, I'm so glad that I met you on retreat. Normally, I'm the one token Asian American on any event or retreat. So I think that was super divine that you and I were both there. So yeah, really grateful for that opportunity and experience. So yeah, my story a little bit. I'm coming to you, as you mentioned, from Barcelona, Spain. I'm originally born and raised in Los Angeles, California, but I've been living in Europe for the past, oh my gosh, I stopped counting. I think 17 and a half years now. So I've been blessed to have this incredible, international, purposeful life, mom to two beautiful children, while coaching women to unleash and lead in their feminine power so that they can be happy and free to also live a more purposeful and pleasure filled life, but it was not always like this. Growing up as a brown skinned Filipino American girl in Los Angeles from the other side of the tracks who looked very different from my peers, I struggled with self worth and confidence. I got teased and bullied as a young girl, and I yearned for a sense of belonging, which ultimately had me seeking external validation and which essentially made me work really hard. I spent the majority of my life looking outside myself for answers. I spent many years in my masculine, pushing through the pain and striving instead of letting life support me. And in LA, I graduated from this prestigious business school, worked for the biggest entertainment studio in the world. I was successful in my own right, but still I played small. I lacked confidence and unaware of my self worth. I did all the things I grew up being told would fulfill me, especially as a 1.5 generation Asian American. But still, I felt something was missing. And when I moved to, when I was in London, became a mother, I thought for sure that's it. That's the missing piece. That's the missing piece. I've ticked all the boxes. Like I'm good. I'm complete and whole. But still, I continued to be hard on myself. I had feelings of shame and guilt because my entire identity up until that point was completely revolved around my work, career. What do you do? Right. And so it wasn't until my childhood best friend, Bo, who was Korean American, passed away from cancer at the tender age of 33 years old. And that changed everything for me. I flew from London to Los Angeles on a completely full Virgin Atlantic flight, and yet I felt so alone. And while that plane was still on the tarmac, getting ready for takeoff, I remember the tears just started flowing down my face. And I thought, okay, what do I do? Do I have a glass of wine? Do I watch a movie? Do I put sunglasses on? Like, do something to numb the pain and, just, yeah. And I realized nothing in that moment can take away the pain that I was feeling. And so, as
Mm.
horrible as this was my epiphany. It was thousands of miles away from everything I ever knew. going to Los Angeles to bury my best friend, whom I've known since 12 years old, still in braces, that this was the catalyst that made me question how I was living, how I was raising my children, how I was managing my energy, and basically just questioning my mortality. Um, and I realized no more being a lone wolf, like no more going at life alone. And so I hired a coach, realized to take control of my life, got accountability, learned the tools and practices to stay in a place of calm and clarity and remember who I truly was, remember my feminine power, and discover the steps to get clear on my purpose and bust through those limiting beliefs around my self worth, become more confident, and begin to live a more conscious, meaningful, empowered, and happy life. So,
Mm.
just from that experience, which is, wow, that was 13 years ago. Um, it's interesting, right, to reflect back on it. But I do believe, and that's part of my passion in this work, is our deepest pain is actually the thing that will bring us to our deepest purpose.
So, I had like all these. I had goosebumps when you were
Mm.
sharing that story, and then I wanted to ask you, when you think about 12-year-old Leslie meeting 12-year-old Bo, what was it that really connected the two of you at that point in time? Was it the fact that, like you said earlier, both of you were Asian Americans, right? Really connected on that level. But I think as 12-year-old girls at that age, there must have been a lot of things that you both really felt close to, right? And that through your adolescent years and so forth, really related to each other from that very, very pure area, right? So not so much the validation from external, like
Mhm.
you said earlier,
Mhm.
the achievements and the career and how you presented yourself to the world, but Bo really saw you for who Leslie was, right? Or is at heart. So
Mhm.
I don't know, like, is this something where you can, me asking you this question right now, you could really think back and really, so who is Leslie?
I love that you picked that up, Jen, and you're asking that question because I don't think anyone's ever picked that up in all my podcast interviews. And it's true. It's true that Bo was one of those people that got me through very hard times, because we did have that resonance with each other. We did understand that we had these, you know, Asian American parents, although, well, okay, my mom was born and raised, but her parents were born and raised in Korea, and my father was born and raised in the Philippines. But we understood that, you have these parents that put all this stress and pressure on you to perform, do good, and wasn't really a childhood or space. I mean, I know things are different now with mental health and people doing the work and raising their consciousness, but back then we're talking about 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. There was no internet, there wasn't those things. And so not growing up in an environment where we didn't have parents that were emotionally available or were able to reflect back, it's okay not to be okay, what are you feeling, I'm here for you. I mean, we didn't have that. And so we
Yeah.
actually, like, we had each other. And that's what got me through, is that, yes, okay, I have my blood family, but there is also your soul family. There is the people, your friends that you choose to have in your life and to create and build and nurture those relationships. So I love that you brought that up, and thank you so much for yeah, bringing that up, because no one ever picks that up. So it must mean that, yes, you identify probably at some level this story as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think and before we started recording I had mentioned, I think and it doesn't have to be Asians, it could be any Hispanics, Latino, like again, it's all cultural, but just the belonging part, right? Like in terms of, yeah, like who are you, and I think a lot of times we always talk about, try to remember the 5-year-old version of yourself, right? What was the 5-year-old version of yourself? And it's always so hard as you get older to be like, I don't remember what the 5-year-old version of myself was, right? And I think that really is kind of where you can dig into the true essence of you, right? When you're not being constructed by societal expectations, by family expectations, and you get shaped into this mold of what people, external, etc., validation expects of you. Um, so yeah, I thank you again for sharing that part. And I wanted to ask, like, when you kind of when Bo passed, um, what got you through that loneliness feeling? And you said you sought out um mental yeah, like you sought out help, right? And so
Mhm.
I think when people say they, when they go through these transformational journeys of help, I everyone's answer is a little bit different, but I'm just curious for you, like, how did you figure it out, like, in terms of like, what books should I read, or like, who should I seek out, who do I talk to be like, hey, I'm really looking for something, I'm stuck, I need a change, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And just like what you said, everyone will have their own experience, which is what I always encourage. And, there's so many teachers, mentors, coaches, healers out there. And I do believe that, there's that saying like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, something like
Yeah.
that. Um, and so for my own personal experience, which I'll speak to, when my best friend passed away, I had another friend that was doing some huge healing work with a shaman, and she had recommended I have a session with him. I'm like, well, what do I got to lose? I mean, I'm Asian American. I'm not really aware of like the whole mind body connection. My mom was very religious. She grew up Catholic, but then she switched to born again Christian. So I was in a very religious upbringing. So no, I didn't know anything about meditation, yoga, essential oils, like breath work, like none of that. And I remember the first session with him, it was mind blowing. I didn't really say much, and he just kind of um, did like this card spread, and then he also took my birth date and all the things, and I remember he did some like essential oils. Um, he did some kind of energy healing work, and I haven't shared this story for very long, but I remember my body shaking. And I asked him, "Is it cold in here? Like, what's happening? I'm feeling cold. Why is my body?" And I was almost getting scared because I remember that's what happened when I had my son. After I gave birth to him, I started shaking.
Shivering. Yeah.
Yeah, shivering. And he said, "No, it's just energy." He says, "Don't nothing to be concerned. It's just energy." I'm like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?"
You're like,
And then at some
what?
point it stopped. At
Energy?
some point it stopped. And then he told me, I remember him saying, yeah, just drink lots of water. He gave me like a whole thing to do, like get these essential oils and these other remedies. And I remember, I think it was like a whole week, Jen, I was crying. A whole week. Maybe it was more than that. And also, I started quote unquote getting sick. Like I was coughing. I felt like there was, something in my lungs. Like, what's going on? I was like, oh my God, like I see this guy and now I'm worse, right? I'm worse. And then he told me, you're going to be emotional. It's just energy, it's emotions. There's grief. Grief is stored in your lungs. I'm like, what is he talking about? And I was like, you know what? Let me just get an x ray just to make sure. Just like, Western medicine, let me just get an x ray. There's nothing in my lungs. It's energetic, it's spiritual. Like, yes, he was right. There was so much grief in my lungs. Yes, from my best friend. And I'm sure generations, years, decades of my life, and also the lives of my ancestors and everything that I've taken on consciously, unconsciously. And it was through that experience I realized, oh my gosh, like I've been holding so much. I've been holding so much. Like I really think everything's okay, but it's not. And it's okay not to be okay. Like that's the only way to get to the other side is to feel the breath of the emotions, the sadness, the grief, the anger and the rage. And I didn't understand that because I didn't have that growing up, and I didn't have
Yeah.
parents that reflected that back to me and were themselves self-aware to hold that space for me and my brother and sister. So this was I worked with him for a year. And then I sat in ceremony with an ayahuasca at the end of the year, and that is another catapult of my spiritual journey and personal development that just that rocked my world. So that was that year in a nutshell. And then that really put me down the path of, once I started the work, once I sought support, um, and I realized, oh my gosh, this stuff is so transformational. It's so healing that I started to, form this passion that it would be selfish not to share this. It would be selfish. Like so many people, like, oh my God, like if you just knew, it's like the best kept secret. So that's what set me on this path, if you will.
So if I rewind back a little bit, you were saying again, like the timeline of both passing. At this point, you were married with kids already, living in Europe, right? And you go off on this very deep healing journey with the shaman and other modalities that you were exposed to. At this point, in terms of, and you had mentioned this earlier, like your very driven career, like that career that you were labeled as, like, Leslie is the so and so, what was that label that you had prior to this? And at what point did you do the career track switch, right? Like in terms of like, okay, no more normal, no more corporate. Like I'm done with all that. I did all that. I clocked in my hours for that. And now I feel so called to help others realize what I've discovered, during this healing process.
Yeah, so actually, I wasn't quote unquote working. I was a stay at home mom. I was fortunate to be able to take some time off and enjoy my kids. And like I mentioned, even though I was enjoying my kids, I was still having feelings of shame and guilt, like, oh my gosh, I'm not really contributing to the world and I'm not really working. you know? Even though being a mother is the most hardest, difficult, but most beautiful and rewarding job on
It's
this planet.
it's a
So
hard job. Being a mom's a hard job. Not that I'm a mom, but I have plenty of mommies around me, and my mom raised three of us, so I
Mm.
understand. And I love the fact that you pointed out the guilty part, right? Like you said, being a mom, but I still felt guilty. I wasn't contributing. I wasn't working. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think it's a big thing for women, especially if you spent so many years in your masculine and you were financially independent. I mean, yeah, all the things. And it's yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot for a woman to change into those roles and those archetypes. So I wasn't working per se, like, I wasn't working for a company or wasn't but yes, through my own commitment to my personal development, somehow it found a way to, different trainings and certifications. And yeah, so the journey, it's not been linear, as you know. No path is linear, but absolutely everything, even my father passing away, which I think if we have time for that, I know you wanted to discuss that, but or not my father, but me having a near death experience, like everything held, like just doing the work and being committed held me, like made, not made me, but there was this invitation to lean even deeper into the work. And by doing that, just naturally, because I'm just geek out on like personal development and spirituality, that I'm able to meet my clients in a deeper way, because I believe, if you haven't gone as far yourself or met yourself there, like there's no way you can meet your clients there and hold that space. So, sometimes when things are so effing difficult or painful, I'm like, okay, I'm in it, it's happening, and just trusting in the universe, divine, that that there's a bigger reason here at play, and it will serve me in my purpose in this world.
So I'm gonna just piggyback off of what you mentioned earlier about your dad passing away and then your near death experience in 2021. If you want to just go in there and illustrate that storyline, and then I'll come back. I have another follow up after that one, that
Okay.
explanation.
Mm. Yeah, my father, I was pregnant with my second child. It was 2010. Actually, okay, so this is before my best friend passed away, but my father had a brain tumor, reoccurring brain tumor between 2005, 2015. He did radiation, then in 5 years he did surgery, and then he passed away 5 years later. I was traveling back and forth from London to LA, like for, was it 6, 7 months every month, while his health just basically just started to fail, and he was put on hospice care. And that essentially, that experience, is what ultimately had me agree to my husband, like, okay, let's move to Barcelona. Because I was like, no freaking regrets. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, we move and we move back. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, we'll regret more if we didn't try, if we didn't go totally outside our comfort zone and toot our own horn and do the thing that most people don't do and go somewhere, like, and form our own path. So I remember I came back from visiting my father in LA, and I told him, I'm like, okay, let's do it. And he was like, what? Really? Oh my God, I have to write this down. What's the date? What's the time? What are we wearing? And everything happens so fast, Jen. And I think that's what happens when you really just surrender and you lean into what's happening. Like, everything comes into alignment, like tuck, 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 and it just moves fast. Like, so I had said, yes, okay, March. My father passed away in June. In between that time, we had enrolled, well, we applied to a kids, school for our kids, and we're like, okay, well, obviously the school is going to make the decision when we can move, if we move. And I kid you not, in like less than 5 weeks, they both got a place for that coming September. Like, I thought we were going to move a year, like a year, give us a year. No, like that September, which meant in like, what was that, 5 months, 4 months? So we're like, oh my gosh, okay, we're still not going to tell anyone. So we looked for a flat. And then again, boom, got the flat. I mean, next thing you know, we're driving down in our car from London to Barcelona, taking the ferry, going down France with our stuff. August, the same year that my father passed away. So it's really, I say it's insane, but that's just how life works. Is, yeah, when you just surrender to what's happening. I really do believe, even through the pain, the chaos, and the heartache, that the universe really does have something bigger, better than we can ever imagine planned for us. We just really have to trust that.
Mm, beautiful. Wow, what an experience. And so would that be very similar to when you had your accident in 2021, like in terms of that effect that you explained just now about your dad passing and moving from London to Barcelona?
Mm. This was a different experience. um,
Well, it
I
changed your
really,
perspective on things, yeah? Like,
I really thought, quote unquote, things were going really well in my life. Like, my business was like doing well, and things were going well in my relationship with my husband and family and all the things. And I fell off my bike in the Swiss Alps. It just fell off my bike. Broke my collarbone in 2 places, fractured my scaphoid. My left wrist was yeah, fractured. It was so painful. I'm sure I left my body at some point, because I asked my best friend who was with me on the mountain, and we had our kids there on the mountain. It was my son that found me with my bike on me, blood everywhere. Oh my God, it was just, God. And I asked her, how long were we up there? And I was like, oh God, I can't believe I was up there that long. Like, I'm pretty sure I left my body. It was so painful that I had to get helicoptered off the mountain and taken to a hospital, and they were checking everything. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have really been worse. Like I said, I could have died because I fell on rocks, and it was, I mean, even them, they were checking all my organs, my spine. They're like, they too were like, I mean, I don't think they said it, right? Because they can see me like I'm in pain and hurt, but it could have been worse. And then I flew to Barcelona to have emergency surgery. Um, and yeah, that was really interesting because I literally couldn't do anything for myself physically. Like, I remember my daughter bathing me after the accident. There was blood all in my hair, and she was doing it for me, and I was like, this is surreal. Like, my teenage daughter is bathing me. So it was a lesson and experience in, again, even deeper surrender. Like, I didn't think I can surrender any more in my life. No, 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 no. Surrender even more. Another initiation. Um, and so I realized, like, okay, I need to lean more into my feminine, which, I'm all about feminine power and raising the feminine collective. So I was like, okay, I gotta stop what I'm doing. I can't do this. I can't do that, and just allow people to support me even more and receive support. And yeah, at first it was difficult, but again, like, what can you do when you physically can't do anything? Like, your universe is like, stop, stop, and it's really up to you. Like, what are you gonna do with that time, that sacred pause? So yeah, it was interesting. But now I've come full circle. I in this past last month, I had the metal plate and rods removed from my collarbone, which was elective surgery. I was told that most people keep it in, but for me, it just felt awkward and clunky. I didn't like it. And now it's like amazing. Like, I'm like, I can't even believe, like, I had that in me and that happened, other than there's the scar to remind me. But I had one of my friends that said, your scar's, badass or something. I was like, oh, okay. Like, it was an intense time, but continuing to lean into the work, receive support, and surrender. I think it's a continual human experience, continual human experience. So yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
love how all these different as I call them, impactful moments, right? And that's what we're here to talk about. I love how you really thread it all together, and it just really shows you and yeah, to your point, like how human this experience is, right? Like that our souls are here, and that each incident and these lessons that are like we encounter, you would think that, like, oh, okay, it can't get worse than this, right? Like one thing after another, and you're like, oh, I've been through this already. Okay, like death experience of others, loved ones, your own death experience, surrendering, and you're thinking, okay, I did it, I learned my lesson, next. And you're like, but we just did this a few years ago, why are we doing it again? And I think it just
absolutely.
and I think that really just shows you um, how impermanent everything is, and how you really just have to stay present and really embrace like each and every one of these things that happen, right? And I think you've done it so eloquently, right? And obviously you're here sharing all of it with us. And I wanted to ask you, from all this, and you had mentioned, you're really geeking into this whole self development, self healing work, and how that's also what you do now with your offerings. How did you figure out what you were going to offer for your clients, right? And how you wanted to shape your offerings, in
Mhm.
terms of, like, when we think about the space you're in, so coaching, all this other type of modalities, there's a lot. It's a very saturated space. How were you able to kind of really go inwards and be like, this is my experience, and this is how I walked my journey, and this is how I feel like I can help others work through their feminine empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. So I was
Mhm.
curious if you could share with us, how did you go through that process to really figure out and fine tune that?
Mm. No, thank you for asking. Well, it wasn't, I think it's been 2 years, no, a little over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that I really started to focus on women. So I've been coaching since 2014. And, it wasn't really like all in because, as you know, I was traveling, settling my kids in Spain. And that was really my focus because my kids were younger back then. And I had clients, I did events, and it wasn't actually until lockdown that it forced me to go outside my comfort zone, go online, because at that point, all my events were in person. So if I went to London, if I went to LA, if I was in Barcelona, then I'd hold an event, then I could, scoop up clients and, have a coaching business. And it wasn't until actually lockdown that I was like, it actually was the best thing for me and my business, because I had to grow. I had to grow. And I moved my business online, and I hired a business mentor for a year in this, women's mastermind, which that I think is super important as well. Like, to have someone who's on the other side reflecting back to you, what are your gifts? What is yours to give in this world, and help you market that in a way, because I think when we're so involved in it, it's hard for us to actually be on the other side, like, okay, what how to market myself. Like, that's difficult, right? So,
Yeah.
having a mentor to help you shape your message and your marketing, I
Yeah.
think
And
that's
be a
super
cheerleader for
important.
you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's what happened in 2020. And then one of my coaches in that program said, Leslie, why don't you try just doing this event for women? And I was like, what? No, but there's this saying that goes, when you try to help everyone, you end up helping no one. Right. And also, because the space is so saturated, you need to stand out. You need to be able to, so people know who to send to you, right? Or like, your marketing needs to address a pain point and a story, so that when your potential clients are reading it, they're like, how does she know? Like, oh my God, that's what I think about. Like, I stay awake at night thinking about the same thing, right? It's like, oh my God, it's like there's a camera. Like, how does she know that that's me? Um, so that you really want to get dialed in on that. And I always say, like, your clients, your book or your program is who you are, what you needed 5-10 years ago. That's it. That's really it. And so when I put that sign on the door for women, this one event, it changed everything. It totally blew up, Jen. It felt so aligned, like my story, like, again, it was like alignment. I think it's multi-leveled. It's like having the support, having a mentor coach, specifically, business. Because I think up until that point, I was doing all the life coach and the healing but I didn't really have a business coach. And that's different. You need, like, if you really want to, if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing this thing, like, you need to have a business coach, because how are you going to make your business sustainable, and how are you going to leverage what you're doing? And
Ball
that's different
game.
coaching. That's different coaching. So
Yeah.
that was life changing for me. And from that one event, I mean, it's just changed everything. And being in that container, I realized how important it was to be with other women in a group. I realized somatically, and I experienced it for myself. Wow, to be in a space with other women, to be really seen and heard and met, I was like, wow, this is, because up until that point, I've been in groups with men and women. And it was very different to be in a space just with women. And so from that experience, I decided, I mean, I always knew I wanted to do a group program, but I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Like, the even deeper healing and transformation, I think, for women is when you do this work together with other women. Yes, privately is super supportive and resourceful as well. I get it. I've done them both. But when you're in that space, that's where the healing and transformation is, because a lot of us most of us, I haven't met one that hasn't been, have been hurt by the feminine. We do not feel safe in our feminine, which is why we are so much in our masculine. And the reason why we're hurt in our feminine is because we have a mother wound and a sister wound. We've been wounded. We've been wounded by the feminine, and it doesn't feel safe. So that's a lot of where my work is identifying those parts where you've been wounded and healing those parts, but also just experiencing, somatically, like, yes, I can be with other women. Yes, I'm not alone. And yes, it's safe.
Love that. For the audience who are listening to this episode and your story, can you just kind of give us Cliff Note version of what what it means to, like you said earlier, women's the mother wound, the sister wound? Like, I think for some people who are listening, they might not understand that terminology. Like, it's kind of like, what does that mean? Could you give some examples of what that is?
You mean the mother wound, sister wound, or just being in your
The
feminine?
mother wound, sister wound, like in terms of
Okay.
like areas, again, to your point, it's like your average Joe on the street.
Mhm.
If you like say that to them, they're gonna look at you like, huh? Like, what are you talking? But if you like explain a
Mhm.
scenario, right, that would probably resonate with them, and they'd be like, oh, that is totally me. I'm going to sign up
Mhm.
with the session with you because I need to work on this. So I just
Mm.
wanted to break it apart a little bit so people who are listening can have an access point to understand a little bit
Yeah.
better. What is it when people say, oh, your mother wound or your sister wound or the feminine side?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I'll speak to the source of our power as women, is our pleasure. So that's also a part of my work, is for women to identify and locate what actually lights them up. Yes, there is a part on our body that, is we are the source of life. We are the source of creation, and that has been silenced or numbed or dumbed down throughout thousands of years. And so, as women today, we come from a lineage of women who have not been able to be in their pleasure, to say yes to themselves, to say no to other things and other people, have been in service to the masculine. So, my initial work is having women identify, okay, what lights you up? What do you enjoy? And that's also going back to that 5-year old child, where it's like, what did you like when you're 5 years old? Right? So it's identifying what lights you up, your pleasure as a source of power, and from that space, realizing somatically that, well, actually, physiologically, when we're in our pleasure, when we're doing something that lights us up and brings us our life force energy, it actually activates and increases those 4 feel-good chemicals of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. So when you can come from that space, imagine the choices that you would be making from that
Mm.
empowered state, rather than victim consciousness, contracted, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? So it's first experiencing that pleasure bit, and then also, okay, why is it difficult for you to reach for your pleasure? So, as I want to say women, because I work with women, but this goes for everyone. I mean, our resistance to pleasure is a trauma response. If we think, no, I'm not going to say yes to myself, I just want to make everyone happy, I'm a people pleaser, or no, it's not for me, maybe I'll do it later. Like, resistance to pleasure is because we've not had that modeled for us. So one example of a mother wound, and I can speak, for myself and my clients, is that if we've had a mother that her whole life was revolved around her husband and her children, and whether she didn't get to go to the university, have her own job, or she had to leave a job and then never went back to it, right? It's how is that woman being in her sovereignty and empowerment, how is she able to hold that space for her daughter? And so it's like, over and over, there's this generational pattern of women that are wounded, not accessing their pleasure, their joy, their happiness, and their life is in service to the masculine, and they end up being resentful, bitter, angry. And then this manifests, as we know, as disease. Stuff happens. And so this is a big part of the mother wound, is realizing, like, oh my gosh, I am a people pleaser. I put people before myself because that's what my mother did. And maybe I'll do something nice for myself. Maybe I'll go on that retreat. Maybe I'll get the massage, like, maybe next week. And then it never happens. But what if you realize, if you keep reaching for your pleasure and you do something that's just for you, no one else and nothing else, what if that can actually make you better? You can actually have more in your life. And so that's a big piece of my work, is the two part is the pleasure piece, and also women realizing, and they're not alone. No one no one's alone in this. I haven't met one woman that's like, no, it was great. It was total, everything's good. We're not talking about our relationship with our mother now. That's not where we
Yeah.
are. Yes, some
Yeah.
of us, we're going on holidays, we have a good relationship, we speak to her, we email, we text. That's not where we are. There is a little girl in each and every one of us that's like, wait, what about me? What about me? Or she's feeling unprotected. She doesn't feel safe. She's not feeling love. Her needs are not met. And what's happening is that we are essentially these little kids that are running around in adult suits because our developmental needs have not been met. And
Oh,
so, as you probably know, like, 95% of our how we do and how we be is run by subconscious programming. So all this work that you do and you have your guests and I do, it's like just, raising the consciousness so that we know, oh my God, okay, no, I'm going to choose differently. That's my mother's voice. That's not really me. That's not who I am. That's what my mother did, but that's not me. I'm going to choose different this time. So it's having the awareness, doing the work, flexing that muscle to know that, yes, you can create a new future based on your consciousness, not your circumstances.
Mm. Okay, we can finish now. No, I was kidding. That was great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on that. I'm going to be mindful of our time, so I will wrap up our conversation. Again, I want to thank you for sharing your journey and your story with us today, and this beautiful offering that you're giving to the world and to all women out there. So I'll throw some of my usual concluding questions at you, and you can choose to answer whichever one you feel called to. I usually like to ask, what keeps you grounded? Um, and I had mentioned this to you earlier before we started recording. So, what would you tell your younger self what you know now? And sometimes I would reverse that question to be, if you didn't want to think of it in that way, it could also be, what would you tell those who are listening to this episode and resonate with your storyline? Like, what kind of 2 cent would you give them? And then the last one is, what resources would you recommend to the audience that could either jumpstart them on this path, or whatever helped you along the way, that you would be like, oh yeah, you should like check out like this business coach, or you should read this book, or you should listen to this and that. So those are
Mm-hmm.
3.
3. I was trying to count it. 1, 2,
Yeah,
3.
I
The
can
first
I
one.
can come back and remind you again, so don't worry.
What keeps me grounded? That was the first one, right?
Yep.
I would say definitely my 2 kids. That keeps me grounded. I think if I don't know, if I didn't have them, I don't know how much of this work I would be doing, because I really would love to leave this world, because we're all going to die in a minute. That's just the human experience. I would love to be able to leave this world a little bit better than when I came into it for my children.
Mm.
The second question was, you have to remind me.
Oh yeah, it's like, what would you tell your younger self, or like what
Yeah.
2 cent would you give to the listeners who resonate
Yes.
with this storyline?
Well, I don't, but I would never tell my younger self, don't do this, don't do that, because I really do believe that everything is happening in divine order and divine reason, and I'm not who I am because of all of that, even as painful and challenging as a lot of them were. What I would tell her is just to remember who you are. Remember who you are. And I think that's a lot of what this work is remembering who we truly are and just getting rid of all those limiting beliefs and perceptions and cultural, societal, all the things, and just
Mm.
remember who you are.
Beautiful. And then resources, so books or anyone that really helped you along the way that you would be like, check these, titles out, or
Yeah, I have one that was a game changer for me. It was one of my sexual somatic teachers that recommended it to me. I did some deep sexual somatic work with some trauma, and I asked her, what books can I read? Go deeper. And she recommended, and tell me if you've read it. Maybe you're gonna have to read it, Jenn. But Pussy, a Reclamation by
I
Mama
have
Gina.
not read it. I will.
Okay,
I'm
well,
gonna put it down.
this is actually required reading for all my clients, private or group. This is a game changer, ladies. So, for those of you ladies listening, I would highly recommend this book. And Mama Gina has really been the pioneer of, you know, um, just women stepping more into their feminine unapologetically, and I want to say smashing the patriarchy, but I get that we have both masculine and feminine energies and qualities. We need both to be in balance, but there's been a big imbalance for very long. So she's amazing, and the book is an easy read. So yeah, Jenn, when you read it, I'd love to hear what you think, and also for your listeners, how
Okay,
that read was for you.
I will let you know. So yeah, we're coming short on time. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to the conversation. If not, I really want to thank you for your time today, for sharing. I'm going to put all the information and the episode resources linked below so people can find you on social media. They can look on your website. They can reach out to you if they're interested in working with you. And yeah.
Aw, thank you so much for having me, Jenn. I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I felt that with you on the retreat, and I'm so glad that we stayed connected, and just love what you're doing and raising awareness and consciousness. I'm just really, really excited and thankful to be a part of what you're doing.
Thank you. Likewise. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.